and this is a full paper, 2015, but variant 1, not variant 2. So paper 1, variant 1, 2015, and was it which summer or winter? Let me see. May. It's a summer 2015, 2015, and this paper is about Islamiyat, as you can see, paper 1. And choose any two of the following passages from Quran and to briefly describe the main themes in each passage. Briefly explain the importance of the themes in a Muslim's life today. Answer A. Themes. This is Surah 2, Ayat 30 to 37, and translation is not given here, that is in the question paper. So the theme is like this. So these verses describes the story of the purpose of creation of humankind. I think it is the one in which God uh, expresses his intention to create Adam as his vicegerent. I'm sorry, I'm just clearing the table at the same time. Okay, here it is. Why are you just telling me? Oh, yes, we are ready now. So, Surah 3, Ayat 30 to 37. These verses describe the story of the purpose of creation of humankind and its superiority over the creatures due to the gift of knowledge. God told his angels about appointing his vicegerent or Khalifa on the earth. He also told them the reason of the elevated status of Adam, who was granted the knowledge of the names of all things. Angels were then commanded by God to prostrate before Adam. All obeyed God, except Iblis, who, driven by arrogance, disobeyed God. This proves that Iblis was not an angel but a jinn. Adam and his wife Eve were sent to paradise for comfortable living as well as testing their free will. There, Iblis, now titled Satan, successfully persuaded them to disobey God, as mentioned in another surah. Then began Satan to whisper suggestions to them. Surah 7, Ayat 20, Al-Araf. Repentance of both was, however, accepted by God, who asked them to shift into the earth for a new phase of life. Muslims are thus instructed to beware of Satan in order to strengthen their relation with God. As next is second passage is Surah 5, Ayat 110. This surah was revealed in Medina with many subject matters, including the interfaith dialogues, and this verse presents the conversation between God and Jesus Christ on the day of judgment. God's address to Jesus confirms his prophethood and negates the corrupt belief of making him son of God. God reminds Jesus his special favors on him and granting him miraculous powers. The purpose of reminding is to make him grateful to God. Miraculous birth of Jesus without involving a father, his ability to cure the blind and the leper, and giving life unto the dead and the lifeless objects, and finally God protecting him from crucifixion were mentioned and to prove that Jesus was a servant of God and by no means his son. The verse also outlines the granting of divine knowledge and wisdom to Jesus. There is repetition of by my leave in the verse as it refers to God's unusual powers and his will to grant prophetic signs to his chosen men. Surah 108. And theme of this surah is God's special love and care for the Holy Prophet. And this is the shortest surah revealed in the early Meccan period. The Prophet was mocked by the Meccans on the death of his second son Abdullah from Hazrat Khadija. On hearing this, his uncle Abu Lahab came out of his house saying, Batara Muhammad. Na'udzubillah. That means Muhammad has been cut off of future hope. Other pagans also began to mock him, and the Prophet then received this surah that gave him the glad tidings of the abundance. The word abundance carries multiple meanings that include the moral qualities of the Prophet, his followers, and the prophethood, the Quran, and his knowledge and wisdom. It also refers to a specially blessed river in paradise that he had seen in his Miraj journey. He and his way, and he and by his way, all Muslims were asked to establish regular prayers and to develop the spirit of sacrifice so that he could continuously strengthen his bond with God and to get constant divine support. The last verse promised destruction of the Prophet's enemies, who are no more remembered in a good way. Part B. Importance of the theme. Surah 2, Ayat 30 to 37. These verses tell Muslims about God's wisdom behind creating Adam as first human, as well as first prophet, who received divine guidance. Thus began the history of humankind and the institute of prophethood. Humans, because of God's bounty of knowledge, began to dominate the world in all domains of life. However, due to their free will, they may go astray under the satanic temptations. Therefore, God made arrangements for their guidance to the right path. Muslims need to acknowledge the purpose of their creation, their supreme status, as well as Satan's entity towards them. All humans are born pure, but it is Satan who can misguide them. Muslims therefore should be grateful to God and be alert about their perpetual enemy Satan. And they should also remember that if they commit sins but express repentance on it, they can hope forgiveness by God. This is testified by this Hadith Qudsi, truly my mercy encompasses my wrath. Surah 5, Ayat 110. This verse shows God's power, His love and care of His messengers as well as other humans. The special blessings of God on Jesus Christ prove His strong relationship with His chosen men, who in turn became a source of guidance for their communities. He gave the book and the wisdom to Jesus as he gave the same to other messengers so that they could tell their people their purpose of living. The Quran reminds Muslims that all such unusual powers and miraculous happenings are under God's will, and whatever of blessings and good things you have, it is from God. Surah 16, Ayat 53 An-Nahl. His miraculous powers to cure the disabled people show how much God is concerned about his servants. God granted health, knowledge, wisdom, and a healthy family life unto humans. So they need to acknowledge all these bounties by expressing gratitude to Him. This will keep them on the path of obedience to God and earning His pleasure. Surah 3, Ayat 108. This passage, like Surah 93, and teaches Muslims to have faith in God's support that surely reaches the noble people. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was assured of abundance in the face of persecutions in Mecca. Muslims need to remember this surah in times of difficulties, and they should not worry about their losses, but instead should focus on whatever God has given them. God's greatest blessing on Muslims is that they are the Ummah or community of the last messenger of God who was given the last divine book, the Quran. They should be thankful to him for his great behavior, and they should try to comprehend and follow the teachings of Quran in order to avail the abundance of its spiritual and moral benefits. They should remember God in all circumstances, and the best way of remembering him is regular prayer as commanded by Quran, and establish regular prayer in order to remember me. Surah 20, Ayat 14, Taha. The teachings, Muslim, the Surah teaches Muslims to be ready for any type of sacrifice that too brings them closer to God. Question 2a. The angel Jibril brought the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad at different times and places. Give examples to show how this took place. And what was the significance of the Prophet being given the revelation by word rather than in writing? Answer. The Quran was revealed in parts to the Quran was revealed in parts to the Prophet, peace be upon him, from 610 to 632 AD over a period of 22 years, 6 months, and 14 days. The first revelation, first 5 verses of Surah 96 Al Alaq, was sent in Ramadan 610 AD in the cave Hira. After the revelation stopped for a period of about 6 months, the Prophet felt quite restless during his interval Fatara al-Wahi until Angel Jibril brought the second revelation, Surah 74, Ayat 1 to 7 al-Mudaththir, that commanded him to start his prophetic mission. Then again, there was a bit longer gap during which the Meccans ridiculed him by saying that his Lord had abandoned him. The Prophet then received Surah 93 al-Duha that contained reassurance by God. After this, he received revelations in relatively quick succession, and they included divine commands of preaching Islam to his relatives, Surah 26, 214, Al-Shura. Then came the revelation about inviting the Meccans publicly and expound openly by what you have been commanded, Surah 15, Ayat 94, Al-Hijr. He would often receive revelations without a warning while he was busy in addressing his companions. The Quran refers to this as surely it is for us to have you uh, committed to in your memory and recite it. And so when we recite it, follow its recitation attentively, then it will be for us to explain it. Surah 75, ayat 16 to 19, Al-Qiyamah. However, he also received revelations in special circumstances, Asbabul Nuzul, or context. Surah 112 Al-Ikhlas was revealed in response to the Meccan queries about the nature and origin of God. Similarly, Surah 18 Al-Kahf was revealed when the Prophet was questioned about the people of the cave. Surah 53 Al-Najm and 94 Al-Inshirah were revealed to console the Prophet in difficult times. During his journey of Hijrah, he received Surah 9, Ayat 40, Al-Tawbah, that mentioned God's support for him. After his migration to Medina, he received revelations about the pillars of Islam and social conduct of the Muslim community. Surah 2 Al-Baqarah, Surah 3 Ali Imran, Surah 4 An-Nisa, and Surah 5 Al-Ma'idah contain most of these details. God sent revelations regarding family laws, crime and punishment, haram and halal foods, and interaction with non-Muslims, including verses about jihad or qital. Receiving the revelation was usually a hard experience of the Prophet. Usually, Angel Jibril appeared in the form of a companion, the Al-Kalbi, whom many other companions were able to identify. According to Sunan Nasai, and this was the easiest and most painless way of revelation. Only occasionally the Prophet encountered Jibreel in his true form. For example, while returning from the cave Hira, he saw Hazrat Jibreel with his wings covering the entire horizon. And during his journey of Miraj, he saw the angel again as mentioned in the Quran, while he was at the highest horizon. Then he came near and hovered around. He was within 2 bows' length or closer. He saw him on another descent at the low tree of the extremity. Surah 53, ayat 79, Surah 13, ayat, ayat 14 An-Najm. During the same journey, while conversing with God, the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah were revealed to him as God, as one of God's gift for him. The Prophet is reported to have received the revelation in dreams, Ruyal Sadaka, and these dreams always came to be true afterwards. An example of this is the Prophet's dream of entering the sacred mosque in 6 AH, the year he signed the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Quran testified to this event in 3 verses of Surah 48 Al-Fatiha. Hazrat Aisha said the Prophet did not see any vision, but it came like the bright gleam of dawn. Sahihain. Moreover, the revelations were directly blown into his heart, as stated in a hadith. Rual Quds believe in the following into my word. no soul will die before consuming his sustenance. Finally, Hazrat Jibreel often brought revelation without being seen by the Prophet. In this mode of receiving revelation, the Prophet would hear the sound of ringing of bells, and this was the hardest way of coming of revelation, as stated by the Prophet. It sometimes came with a sound like a sound of a bell, and that is the hardest one to me. Sahih Bukhari. During such episodes, there was an unusual increase in the body weight of the Prophet. His camel Qaswa could be seen to be collapsing if he received revelation while riding it. Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit reported that once he and the Prophet were asleep in the Prophet's mosque. The Prophet was resting his leg on Zaid's thigh. After a while, Hazrat Zaid suddenly woke up as he uh, felt his thigh bone was about to crack because the Prophet was receiving revelation at that time. The Prophet was often seen sweating in winters and shivering in summers while revelation came to him by this way. Part B, the Quran was revealed on the Prophet who had not acquired any formal education, and this is described in the Quran as have faith then in God and in His Messenger, the Ummi, unlettered Ummi Prophet. Surah 7, Ayat 158, Al-Iraf. So the Quran was revealed in the form of scattered verses. The word Quran carries many meanings, and one of its roots is qiraat or recitation, and that is why the first word of the first revelation is ikra, and that means read or recite. Thus, unlike previous books, one way of its preservation was that the Quran will remain a book of recitation too, in addition, and to be translated and explained. Recitation of the Quran is a special art, tajweed, and it is a source of earning reward by God. Moreover, it has a miraculous impact on its listeners. Hazrat Umar, a man with a strong poetic sense, was moved by the recitation of Surah Taha and decided to embrace Islam. Question 3a. Write about the changes in the relationship between the Prophet and the Quraysh in the years between his marriage to Khadija and the death of Hazrat Abu Talib. 10 marks. Part B. Why is it significant that the Quraysh were still willing to keep their belongings with the Prophet after he started to preach Islam? 4 marks. Answer Part A. The Prophet had established his repute as al-Sadiq, the truthful, and al-Amin, the trustworthy, well before he married Hazrat Khadija. As a result of expanding her trade with honesty and fair play, his image was enhanced as a nobleman in Mecca. He remained aloof from idol worship, indecencies, and immoral practices that had plunged the society of Mecca. And this further strengthened his repute in the eyes of the Meccans. Many Qurayshites used to give their belongings to him without the least degree of distrust or doubt about his conduct. The Prophet, in his adulthood, emerged as an unusually intelligent and wise man. As the building of Kaaba was located in a low-lying valley, it was flooded during heavy rains. and was damaged. Therefore, the Quraysh decided to repair the damaged building of the Kaaba when the Prophet was in his early 30s. After most of the work was complete, a dispute arose among the Meccan chiefs about the fixing of the black stone Hajar al-Aswad, and elderly Meccan Abu Umayyah suggested that the person entering the sacred mosque the following morning should be assigned the task of making a decision about this. The Prophet ﷺ, as was predestined, was the first man to enter the haram the next morning. All tribal chiefs greeted him and asked him to resolve the dispute. The Prophet ﷺ, acting quite intelligently, found a peaceful solution. He spread a sheet on the ground, placed the black stone on it, asked every tribal chief to hold the sheet together, and himself placed the stone in its place. This surprised everyone, and a possible fight among the tribes was averted. Things, however, would soon start changing for the worse. At 40 in 610 AD, Hazrat Muhammad was formally awarded a prophethood. After some time, he was divinely instructed to preach, expound openly what you are commanded. Surah 15, Ayat 94 Al-Hijr. Accordingly, he began a public preaching, and with this, the behavior of the Meccans also changed. They initially ignored him, they ridiculed him by saying, "The unbelievers say, these are nothing but tales of the ancients." Surah 6, Ayat 25 Al-An'am, and Surah 8, Ayat 31 Al-Anfal. For them, Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ did not preach anything new, but the same old stories that many reformers had done earlier. As time passed, the Meccans got more furious, and the firmness and seated fastness of the Prophet and the steadfastness of the Prophet, sorry, firmness and furious on the firmness and steadfastness of the Prophet. They started a campaign of persecution against him and his followers. Leading chiefs of Quraysh like Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, Umayyah bin Khalf, Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth, Walid bin Mughira, and Aswad bin Abd Yaghus took the lead in creating difficulties for him. They covered with the thorns the lanes he passes through. He was mocked by them whenever he offered prayers. When he bowed down into prostration, they would bury him under the dead and tails of a camel, and they would pass a sheet of cloth around his neck and drag him so hard that his neck was bruised. When he recited the Quran, they abused him as well as the Quranic verses. Abu Lahab usually interrupted his preaching as he addressed an audience in public. Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth roped his neck with a sheet of cloth and pulled at it when the Prophet was offering prayer in the Haram. Hazrat Abu Bakr rescued the Prophet and said to Uqba, "You kill a man who merely says that God is one." He was titled as a magician, poet, a man possessed by spirits in order to keep him from preaching. God sent Surah 53 Al-Najm in his defense that says, your companion Muhammad has not strayed, nor has he erred, nor does he speak anything of his own. Surah 53, ayat 2 to 3. He was ridiculed on the death of his second son from Hazrat Khadija, and they called him Abtar, a man without progeny. Similarly, he was mocked during a period of an unusual delay in receiving revelation until he received Surah 93 Al-Duha. The Quraysh tried to bribe him by sending Utbah bin Rabia. He tried to bargain with him by offering him worldly wealth and power. The Prophet in return recited these verses. This is a revelation from God, a book whose verses are explained in detail, giving glad tidings and warning, but most of them turn away and say, our hearts are screened from that to which you invite us. Surah 41, Ayat 1 to 5. Fusilat. Utbah left in despair and told the event to the chiefs. Then the Quraysh imposed a boycott on his tribe, Banu Hashim, from 616 to 619 AD. His uncle Abu Talib and wife Khadija died at the end of the boycott. His, this emboldened the Quraysh as Abu Talib's death had deprived the Prophet of the tribal protection. The Prophet would be changing his strategy after this tragic loss. Part B. The Prophet had established his unquestionable repute as an exceptionally noble and under a divine scheme. The Quraysh never doubted his conduct as they had always seen him a noble and a pious man even before his prophetic mission. They had also witnessed the Prophet's marriage with Hazrat Khadija was the result of his thorough honesty. And they had seen utmost degree of honesty of the Prophet on several occasions and thus never doubted his character. The main reason they opposed and rejected him was his preaching of Tawhid and ethics that they found difficult to follow as they had been following the corrupt practices for centuries. Moreover, they had political and economic reasons to resist him as they feared the Prophet's success meant loss of the privileges they enjoyed as a gang of priests of Mecca. Therefore, they did not stop the old tradition of keeping their belongings with him after he began preaching Islam. Question 4a. And the Prophet paired Muslims of Makkah and from Medina after the migration Hijrah. Give examples to show the character of the relationship between various emigrants and helpers. 10 marks. Part B. Today, Muslims often seek refuge in neighboring countries. Show how the examples of the emigrants and helpers can still provide a model today. 4 marks. Answer. Part A. The Prophet paired the Muhajirin with the Ansar in a wise way. When the construction of Prophet's mosque was nearing completion, he summoned the two communities at the house of Hazrat Ans bin Malik. By then, the total number of migrants was 45, as there were many already settled in Abyssinia since 615 AD. The Prophet said unto the Ansar, these Muhajirin are your brothers. Then he called one from the Muhajirin and one from the Ansari and declared, each of you is a brother to the other. The Ansar took their brothers in faith to their homes, gathered all their stock, and shared the whole equally. The Ansar mainly earned by cultivating their oases, but the Muhajirin were mainly traders and knew nothing about agriculture, and so it was decided that the Ansar would manage the whole business and give half the produce to the Muhajirin. Some of the major examples of this pairing uh, include some of the very prominent companions. Hazrat Abu Bakr bin Kharija bin Zaid, Hazrat Umar bin Khattab bin Itaban bin Malik, Hazrat Uthman bin Aus bin Sabit, and Musab bin Umar bin Ayyub Ansari, Hazrat Ayyub, Abu Ayyub, bin Abu Ayyub. While pairing the two communities, the Prophet paired those who had common interests, skills, and had the same socioeconomic status. Primarily, each Muhajir was to act as a teacher to his Ansari brother. So, Hazrat Sa'd bin Zaid, one of the earliest converts and a highly learned man, was paired with Hazrat Ubay bin Ka'b, who emerged as major scribe of the Prophet. Hazrat Abu Hudayfa was the son of a very powerful Meccan chief. He was accordingly paired with Hazrat Abbad bin Bishr, the tribal chief of Ashhal. Hazrat Abu Ubaidah was gifted with military skills and ability to excel as a leader. He was made the brother of Hazrat Sa'd bin Muad, the chief of Aus tribe. Hazrat Abdurrahman bin Auf had inherited business skills. His bond was made with a rich Ansari, Hazrat Sa'd bin Rabi, who offered one of his two wives to his Muhajir brother, but Hazrat Abdurrahman declined the offer. He instead requested Hazrat Sa'd to guide him into the market, who took him into the famous bazaar of Banu Kanka. And then he purchased some cheese and ghee and retailed it all the day. In a short time, he had earned so much that he got married. Gradually, his business flourished so much that he built a house that resembled a fortress. Hazrat Abu Bakr set up a clothes shop in Sun, whereas Hazrat Uthman dealt in dates and soon became a rich trader. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu also established his business and his trade visit extended to Persia. Muhajirin were allotted vacant plots lying unused near the houses of the Ansar, and those Ansar who had no spare plots shared their houses with their brothers in faith. Hazrat Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Miqdad, and Ubaid got lands closer to the Ansar's houses. This brotherhood was treated as a real kinship. On the death of an Ansari, his property was inherited by his Muhajir brother, and this tradition was based on the Quranic command, the two, they who believed in God and migrated and fought in the way of God with all their wealth and life, and those who gave them shelter and helped them are brothers of each other. Surah 8, Ayah 10, Al-Anfal. However, after the Battle of Badr, this practice was abandoned by another Quranic verse. Those having blood relations are more entitled to each other's inheritance. Surah 8, Ayah 75, Al-Anfal. Interestingly, Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu was left unpaired after all the arrangements. When he told the Prophet about this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam declared him his brother in faith. This shows the unusual closeness of Hazrat Ali to the Prophet. However, it should be noted that with time, the condition of the Muhajirin began to improve after the expulsion of the Jews of Banu al-Nadir. Their oases and orchards were given to the Muhajirin with the permission of the Ansar. Later, after the conquest of Khyber, the Muhajirin returned their assets to the Ansar. The hospitality and generosity of the Ansar is admired by the Quran. As for those who had settled in the city and embraced the faith before the arrival of the emigrants, they love whoever immigrates to them. Surah 59, Ayat 9 al-Hush, unprecedented in the world history. When Bahrain was conquered, the Prophet offered the land unto the Ansar, but they asked him to give equal share unto their Muhajir brothers too. Thus, a unique kind of fraternity was established by Islam that was based on common faith. Part B. Mawakhat is a living institute established by the greatest reformer of humankind. Its relevance can be seen in modern times in many Muslim states. Pakistani Muslims revived the spirit of this universal brotherhood in the 1980s when when they provided food, shelter, and clothing to the Afghan refugees who migrated to Pakistan, leaving all their assets behind. Many Pakistanis set up joint business with them, acting on this instruction of the Prophet. O you servants of God, be brothers. Muslims living anywhere in the world should follow the example of the Ansar and helping fellow Muslims migrating to their countries, especially if the emigrants leave their homelands due to persecutions and the threat to their lives. And they should demonstrate generosity by giving them some charity or at least extend the Qarz-e Hasana interest-free loan. This will give them a peace of mind and hope of a greater reward by God. Question 5, Part A. Write about the role of Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in the lifetime of the Prophet. Surah 10 marks. Part B. What lessons can Muslims learn from Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu's conversion? 4 marks. Answer Part A. Hazrat Umar belonged to the Banu Adi branch of the Quraysh. He was a fierce and powerful man in Makkah, known for his physical strength, wealth, poetry, and oratorship. He was opposed to Islam. It is reported that the Prophet had prayed unto God for the conversion of either Amr bin Hisham, Abu Jahl, Abu Jahl, or Umr bin al-Khattab. God granted his prayer as Umar embraced Islam in a dramatic way. He embraced Islam by about 615 AD, shortly after the conversion of Hazrat Hamza. According to a popular tradition, he left his home with a plan to kill the Prophet, but on his way was told by Nuaym bin Abdullah about the conversion of his sister Fatima and her husband Hazrat Said by bin Hazrat Said bin Zaid. Hazrat Umar rushed to Fatima's home and there he heard Khabbab bin Arad reciting Surah 20, Taha. He stormed the house and, driven by anger, beat Fatima so much that she began to bleed. His heart was softened, and he asked for the sheets of the Quran. He washed his hands and read the Quranic verses written on the sheet. Having a strong poetic sense, Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was impressed by the rhyming pattern of the surah and its spiritual charm. He decided to embrace Islam. Hazrat Khabab, uh, who has who was hiding a small room, came out and told Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu about the Prophet's invocation. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu approached the Prophet at the house of Al-Arqam near Safa Hill. The Prophet used to teach the newly converted Muslims in this house. Therefore, it was also called Darul Islam or House of Islam. A companion saw him coming with a naked sword and told the Prophet about him. Hazrat Hamza said, Hazrat Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, let him come, he is welcome if he has good intentions, otherwise he will be beheaded with his sword. Much unto the surprise of all, Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu submitted to Islam. He is believed to be the last person to embrace Islam at this house. His conversion raised the morale of the Muslims as he declared his conversion to the Quraysh. Muslims therefore began to offer prayer openly after his conversion. The Prophet gave him the title Al-Faruq, the one who makes a distinction between the truth and falsehood. The Prophet further acknowledged Umar's nobility by saying, God placed the truth upon the tongue of Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and his conversion greatly infuriated the Quraysh, and their opposition to Islam became more intense. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu showed his courage again when he migrated to Medina openly, and none of the pagans dared to block his way. In Medina, he remained a strong source of protecting the Prophet. He participated in all the battles. In the Battle of Badr, he shared a camel with Abu Bakr and Abdurrahman bin Auf. After his battle, he gave his widow daughter Hafsa in marriage to the Prophet. In the Battle of Uhud, he was a part of the human shield made by the close companions around the Prophet. He participated in the digging of the ditch in 5 627 AD before the Battle of Khandaq. He was unhappy over the terms of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, as he thought that they did not favor the Muslims. He was, however, calmed down by Hazrat Abu Bakr and later by the Prophet, who recited the revelation he had just received. We indeed granted you a clear victory. Surah 48, Ayat 1, Al-Fath. This was a glad tidings of the ultimate success of Islam, and Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was pacified. According to the commentators of the Quran, many verses of the Quran were related to Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. For example, the verse about offering prayer at the station of Ibrahim was revealed after Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu had asked the Prophet about the history of that sacred stone, station of Ibrahim, and make you the station of Ibrahim as a place of prayer. Surah 2, Ayat 125, Al-Baqarah. Similarly, the verses about the observance of hijab by the wives of the Prophet were also revealed after Hazrat Umar had expressed his desire for the same. He had noted Hazrat Sauda going out of her apartment after the Isha prayer had drawn her attention towards the observance of hijab. The verse says, O Prophet, tell your wives and daughters and the believing women that they should cast their outer garments when going out. Surah 33, Ayat 59, Al-Ahzab. The Prophet is reported to have admired Umar on many occasions. For example, a hadith of Jami Tirmidhi says, the sun has not risen on a better man than Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, like several other Muslims, found it hard to believe in the death of the Prophet, but when Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu recited Surah 3, Ayat 114, he had to accept the reality. Part B. Conversion of Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu teaches Muslims God's power and decree. He has an open and fierce enemy of Islam, but was predestined to become a Muslim. His mind was changed on hearing the Quranic verses. Being an educated man with a refined poetic taste, he was convinced that such verses could not be composed by any human. This is testified by the Quran itself. Had we thought, had had we sent down this Quran on a mountain, O Muhammad, you would have seen it humbled and torn apart by the awe of God. Surah 59, Ayat 21, Al-Hajj. Muslims should therefore ponder over the meanings and the power of the Quran. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu knew well how hostile the Quraysh were to Islam, but he made his conversion public. Muslims today should not fear the consequences of declaring the faith. They should trust in God and remember none can harm them as long as God is with them. And they should dedicate all their energies to the cause of Islam.